Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving right into one of the most fiercely debated, emotionally charged, and honestly universally relevant topics out there, the ultimate financial showdown between renting and buying a home. You know, for generations, the script has been basically written for us, right? You go to school, you get a good job, and then as soon as you literally scrape together enough cash, you buy a house. It's the ultimate milestone. But what if the math doesn't actually back up the myth? Today, we're going to break down the numbers, strip away the emotions, and look at the cold, hard facts of how housing really impacts your net worth.
Okay, let's dive into this, because the idea that renting can sometimes be the smarter financial decision, wow, that is a massive paradigm shift. I mean, it goes against pretty much everything we've been taught. We're constantly told that renting is just throwing money away, while buying is the absolute gold standard investment. But when you start treating your housing and your investing as two completely separate decisions, well, a very different picture starts to emerge. We're going to explore exactly why that is and how it could completely alter your path to building wealth.
So here's what we're looking at today. First, the surprising truth. Then, buying, the traditional dream. Next, renting, the flexible alternative. After that, investing the difference. And finally, when to buy or rent.
Section 1. The surprising truth. Now, while there absolutely isn't a single right answer for every single person, the traditional one-size-fits-all advice isn't always accurate either. Consider this. There is no single answer for everyone, but if we're talking about building wealth, many people are surprised to learn that renting can sometimes be the smarter financial decision. Notice the phrasing there, building wealth. We're not just talking about having a yard for a dog or painting the living room blue. We're looking at this strictly through the lens of maximizing your net worth over a lifetime. And when wealth is the main goal, well, we kind of have to challenge some of those deeply ingrained societal myths.
Section 2. Buying, the traditional dream.
Look, before we go completely challenging the norm, we have to objectively evaluate the traditional path. Buying a home definitely offers a powerful mix of both financial and emotional benefits. You know, every time you make that mortgage payment, a chunk of it goes toward building equity. Plus, over time, the property might appreciate in value. If you lock in a fixed-rate mortgage, your housing cost becomes super stable, which is great for fighting off inflation. And obviously, you get the freedom to customize. Want to knock down a wall? Go for it. It brings this undeniable sense of ownership, pride, and deep emotional security. And honestly, that is very real and incredibly valid.
So the crucial point is, we also have to look at the other side of the ledger. Homeownership comes with massive and, frankly, often hidden long-term costs. First off, you're locking up a ton of capital in a huge down payment. Then, you're suddenly on the hook for property taxes, homeownership insurance, and just relentless maintenance costs. The roof starts leaking? Yeah, that's entirely on you. You also lose a degree of flexibility. If a dream job pops up across the country, moving is a whole ordeal. And as we've seen, the housing market can absolutely decline. But maybe the biggest silent wealth killer of them all? The interest. You are paying enormous amounts of interest to a bank over 20 to 30 years.
$1 million. Just let that sink in for a second. A home with a sticker price of $500,000 can easily end up costing you well over $1 million by the time it's fully paid off. How is that possible? Well, when you factor in the mortgage interest over 30 years, the property taxes year after year, the insurance premiums, and all that inevitable maintenance, I'm talking new HVAC systems, landscaping, plumbing fixes, the true cost of ownership is just staggering. A house is incredibly expensive to carry.
Section 3. Renting, the flexible alternative.
All right, so it's time to shift our perspective on renting. Let's move away from that old idea of throwing money away and start viewing it as a highly calculated, strategic financial choice. The advantages of renting are honestly all about liquidity and flexibility. Think about it. You have significantly lower upfront costs, usually just a security deposit instead of wiping out your savings for a down payment. You have the ultimate freedom to relocate for jobs or just, life adventures without the nightmare of selling property. And the best part? Zero maintenance or repair bills. The water heater bursts? You just make a quick phone call. You aren't writing a massive check or frantically watching a DIY plumbing tutorial at 2 in the morning. This usually means way less day-to-day financial stress. But here is the most important point, the one that changes the whole game. You can take the money you aren't spending on homeownership and invest the difference.
But, to be totally fair and impartial, we absolutely have to acknowledge the clear disadvantages of renting too. You aren't building equity in a physical asset. Your rent can, and let's be real, likely will, increase over time. You also have far less control over your space. You usually can't remodel or do any major upgrades. And you're subject to landlord risks. They could decide to sell the building or just not renew your lease, which forces you to move when you don't even want to. Basically, it's a trade-off. You're trading control for flexibility.
Section 4. Investing the difference.
Okay, we've reached the climax of our explainer. This is where the real wealth-building math comes into play and where we see how renting can actually outpace owning. So financially savvy people often ask themselves this specific question. If buying a house costs $4,000 a month, factoring in mortgage, taxes, insurance, and maintenance, and renting a similar place costs $2,500 a month, what happens if I take that extra $1,500 every single month and invest it? Right there, that is the wealth equation. And this brilliantly illustrates the dynamic. When you buy, your entire $4,000 housing budget gets sunk straight into the house. Sure, a portion builds equity, but a huge chunk goes to unrecoverable costs like interest and taxes. But look at the renter. They spend $2,500 on housing. True, they aren't building home equity, but they have $1,500 of liquid cash left over every single month. Instead of handing that over to a bank for interest or a contractor for a new roof, they drop that $1,500 straight into stocks, ETFs, or maybe even a business. And because of the absolute magic of compound interest, over a 20 to 30-year timeline, that consistently invested difference can snowball into a massive, highly liquid financial portfolio. I mean, in many market conditions, the historical returns of the stock market actually outpace the average appreciation of real estate, so over decades, that stock portfolio can actually exceed the total net wealth created by owning a home, and you get all that without a single headache of property management.
But wait, here is the absolutely crucial catch. Renting only wins if you actually invest the savings. This takes serious, rock-solid discipline. If you rent for $2,500, but then you take that $1,500 difference and blow it on fancy vacations, a massive car payment, or just general lifestyle inflation, yeah, buying the house will almost always come out ahead mathematically. Buying essentially forces you to build equity. Renting? Renting requires you to actively choose to build wealth.
Section 5. When to buy or rent.
So, what does this all mean for you? Let's break down a concrete framework to help you make the smartest decision for your life. Generally, you should lean toward buying if you plan to stay in the exact same location for 7 or more years, which helps you absorb those hefty closing costs. Buy if the total monthly mortgage payment is roughly similar to local rent. Buy if you have a highly stable income, and, most importantly, if you deeply crave that lifestyle stability. On the flip side, you should probably rent if you move frequently for work or just for fun. Rent if home prices in your area are astronomically expensive compared to rental rates. Rent if you have the strict discipline to consistently invest your savings, and if you truly value flexibility and peace of mind over owning property.
Ultimately, it really comes down to knowing yourself and knowing what kind of investor you are. Look, for the average person who honestly struggles to save and invest consistently, buying a home is a phenomenal tool. It acts as a forced savings mechanism. The bank makes you pay your mortgage, which forces you to build equity. But if you are a highly disciplined investor, renting a home and diligently investing that capital difference can actually create way more long-term wealth, all while giving you ultimate flexibility in your life.
I want to leave you with this final paradigm-shifting thought. A house is primarily a place to live. An investment is something that puts money in your pocket. If you can start treating where you live and how you grow your money as two completely distinct, separate decisions, you really open yourself up to significantly better financial outcomes. So don't just blindly follow the traditional script just because it's what everyone else does. Run the numbers, be honest about your own habits, and design the wealth equation that actually works for you. So what's your next move going to be? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.